Hi, it's James. Welcome to episode 6 of Inversiverse. In this presentation, we're going to cover the following subjects, concepts and models: semantics, pragmatics, closed-loop systems, and how they relate to communication, body language, manipulation, indoctrination, and brainwashing, with some examples. Let's now look at semantics, its definition and meaning, how it plays a key role in our lives, each and every day, even when we're not aware. Semantics is the branch of linguistics and philosophy concerned with the meaning of words, phrases, sentences, and texts. It explores how meaning is constructed, interpreted, conveyed, and processed in various forms of communication. Here's a detailed breakdown of semantics, its aspects, examples, and contributions by prominent researchers. Number 1. Linguistic semantics focuses on how meaning is encoded and interpreted in natural languages. Subfields include lexical semantics, studies the meaning of words and their relationships, synonym, antonyms, polysemy, etc. Examples include the word bank. The word bank can mean a financial institution or the side of a river. This is known as polysemy. Researcher John Lyons, Semantics, 1977. Compositional semantics examines how words combine to form meaningful phrases or sentences. Example, the sentence, John loves Mary, conveys a relationship between John and Mary. Researcher Richard Montag grammar reference. Pragmatic semantics explores context-dependent meanings, e.g. implied meanings, speaker's intentions. An example is, can you pass the salt? Which implies a request, not a question, about ability. Researcher H.P. Grice, Logic and Conversation, 1975. Semantics and pragmatics are subjects which are not usually taught as part of lower-level education or within many school curriculum previously discussed. But understanding about semantics can help us become aware of many things in life. So let's continue to further look at formal semantics, number 2, which involves mathematical approaches to meaning, often using logic to model language. Key concepts of formal semantics include truth conditional semantics. Meaning is determined by the conditions under which a statement is true. Example, the statement, snow is white, is true if snow is white. Researcher Donald Davidson, Truth and Meaning, 1967. Then we have model theoretic semantics, uses formal structures, models, to represent meanings of linguistic expression. Researcher Barbara Pertwee, known for integrating linguistics with formal logic. There are numerous subfields of this specialized field of language and linguistics. Let's explore further cognitive semantics, but first, ask yourself why it might not be taught at lower level education. Is this manipulative itself in nature? Cognitive semantics examines how meaning is shaped by human cognition and experience. Key concepts of cognitive semantics include embodied cognition. Meaning arises from physical and sensory experiences. For example, the metaphor, time is money, links abstract concepts to physical experiences. Researcher George Lakoff, Metaphors We Live By, 1980. Frame semantics. Meaning is understood through conceptual structures called frames. Example, the word buy involves a frame of a buyer, a seller, item, and transaction. This was pointed out by researcher Charles Fillmore. Computers also incorporate semantics. AI is teaching itself behavior based on the discussions we have in the online community by trawling the internet, through posts, videos, and much more. Is it not imperative we ourselves understand the greater meaning of our own interactions before teaching AI? I ask. Computational semantics uses computational methods to process and understand linguistic meaning. Applications include natural language processing, NLP, tasks like sentiment analysis, machine translation, and chatbots, such as ChatGPT, for example. Example, understanding user intent in virtual assistants like Siri or Alexa. Researcher Christopher Manning, Stanford University NLP Group. Semantic networks is a subfield of computational semantics, which represents meaning and relationships in graph-like structure. Example, WordNet, a lexical database for English. Researcher George A. Miller. This brings us on to our next subfield. In life, some individuals look to philosophy to aid us in understanding the meaning of life, and ask or posit, why are we here? Philosophical semantics explores the nature of meaning, reference, and truth. Key concepts include sense and reference. Phrygian semantics differentiates between the sense, concept, and reference object of an expression. Example, the morning star and the evening star, which both refer to Venus in the sky, but have different senses. Researcher Gottlob Frege. Speech act theory. Meaning includes the act performed, e.g. asserting, questioning, commanding. For an example, saying I apologize performs the act of apologizing. Researcher J. L. Austin, How to Do Things with Words, 1962. Semantics influence culture and societal context, and vice versa. Sometimes appropriation gives a negative connotation in meaning, depending on what is being presented and by whom. and while some can find the linguistics encouraging, others may find it offensive. Cultural and social semantics examines how meaning is influenced by cultural and social contexts. Key concepts include semantic variation. Different cultures may interpret words or concepts differently. Example, the concept of honor varies across cultures. Researcher Anne Wieberskick, Semantic Primitives, 1972. Critical semantics is a key concept. Investigates power dynamics in meaning making, e.g. political or media discourse. Example, the use of terms like freedom fighter versus terrorist, which we often hear about at this moment in time, through all that's going on in the world. One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist is a commonly termed phrase. This was posed by researcher Norman Fairclough, Critical Discourse Analysis. Let's summarise what's been presented before advancing to an example that I've put together of how semantics can be used to manipulate, create confusion and mislead. Semantics is a multidisciplinary field with wide applications. Each subfield contributes to understanding different aspects of meaning. We covered linguistic semantics, structure of meaning in language, formal semantics, which is logical representation of meaning, cognitive semantics, which is mental processes shaping meaning, computational semantics, AI and neuro-language processing applications, philosophical semantics, the nature of meaning and truth, cultural and social semantics, which is the influence of context on meaning. By exploring these, we gain insights into how language, thought, and society interact. Let us now explore the semantics and pragmatics of a real-world situation, and example I've chosen to look at is USAID, featured recently in the news after Donald Trump and Elon Musk's audit of the agency. You may ask yourself, how does this relate to a linguistic semantic and/or a pragmatic? On first perception, the interpreted pragmatic for myself, and hopefully yourself recognise, it features the word aid. You may think it means United States Aid Agency, an agency of the US for providing aid. That's great. Most individuals love to contribute to charity and be of aid to others in a disadvantageous situation. Therefore, you may interpret and understand by default that the intent or implied nature of the organisation is to be of benefit and for the good of the people. It's viewed with positivity. Why would you question the intent or implied nature of an organisation providing aid? But let's examine at a deeper level the linguistics and semantics, meaning of the title, USAID, because it isn't the word aid. It's an intentionally misleading title. The title does not reflect aid in any form, and this is how individuals within our society and organisations manipulate and deceive people with illusionary symbolism, linguistics, and manipulation of language through semantics and pragmatics. The title USAID is an acronym. An acronym is defined as the first letters, culminations of some words spoken as one word. Its full title is actually United States Agency for International Development. International development is not aid, although some forms of development are considered by legal definition to be aiding. When auditors analysed what finances and money were being distributed, many reasons for the donations and pledges by USAID were not justifiable under their operating remit or passed on to real people as aid. Huge donations to private companies and individuals in positions of power, billionaires that were already wealthy such as George Soros, private TV companies such as the BBC, and 700,000 subscriptions to Disney are just a few examples. These entities do not require aid. Disney had already been struggling financially through people cancelling their subscriptions due to people becoming aware of the paedophilic material presented through their content. This money was illegally provided, not in the interest of those really in need around the globe, or in America, to allow them to maintain its business from failing. The written press, namely the New York Times and Pimlico, established corporations that are meant to be fully self-funded through marketing and advertising, payment subscriptions from the public, certainly not justified to be funded by essentially American taxpayers' money as aid. The reasons these corporations were given finances, under the manipulative guise of the title, was to corrupt officials, influence individuals' minds, control a negative agenda for indoctrination and brainwashing purposes through their platforms, finance censorship, and much more. USAID financed almost all countries to gain influence. Statistics highlight the increase in payments upon the arrival of COVID-19 in late 2021 and continued until 2025. Featured on this page is Mark Zuckerberg admitting that censorship was carried out during 2021 with reference to COVID material, which at the time was denied, when many of us were speaking out that this was happening, but we didn't know how the money was being distributed to finance such a thing. Part of the audit discovered money was being donated without the full details of the benefactors being provided, leaving no audit trail for the Treasury, so billions of dollars are not traceable in any form, unaccountable, the money is just gone. This was highly fraudulent activity, and US taxpayers have a right to know how and where their money is being used, and those responsible for frivolously handing out funds be held accountable, face trial for their crimes. In all actuality, the money is and was being laundered, most likely back to corrupt politicians funding illegal movements within society, allowing these corrupt officials to adjust and control government and promoting tyrannical policy changes which affect society to its detriment. To further back up this claim, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky recently highlighted, as pictured, that funds which were pledged to Ukraine by the US were never fully received. A sum of $177 billion was pledged or donated, and he can only account for $75 billion, so it would appear $102 billion has disappeared. All very suspect activity. It's extremely ironic that the US government can lose $102 billion and provide no justifiable reason for how it's been lost or mishandled, which is a total lie and fabrication only a naive idiot would believe. Yet they know exactly how, where and when you spend your own money. They always know what you or I are doing with our money, but they just can't seem to fathom what they do with the taxpayers' money that is given to them to be used appropriately to our or the American taxpayers' benefit. However, the US taxpayers did not benefit, only the criminals. If you do not provide adequate accounts for tax purposes, they will arrest you and me, and send you to jail. They would certainly not justify defence, we just didn't keep a record as they have done so. It is time these criminals were held to account, once and for all. Individuals would not need aid in this world if these criminals didn't steal it in the first place. People around the world prefer to live in denial and avoidance, unfortunately, and believe that such a thing would ever happen. But it does, day in, day out, and the world is becoming more impoverished because of this. The very foundation of this organisation is to provide aid, but the aid is not getting to the people that truly need it. Our leaders continually lie. They use subtle language prompts that allow them plausible deniability, but anyone with common sense and aware can discern the lies through understanding semantics and pragmatics. Let's take a look at pragmatics, its concept and use in language, and the rules and roles it plays within our mindsets, thought processes, and how understanding more about it can enlighten our experiences and consciousness of everything going on in our lives. Pragmatics is a branch of linguistics, studies how context influences the interpretation of meaning in communication. It examines how speakers convey meaning beyond the literal meaning of words and how listeners interpret intended meanings in social contexts. Pragmatic skills break down as pictured. Number 1, maintaining eye contact while attending to the speaker, while answering questions, while commenting. And 2, social greetings, responding to greetings. What's up? How are you? Initiating greetings. Hello, goodbye, what is your name? Number 3, conversation starters. Excuse me, but I would like to tell you about. Can you help me with? 4, waiting your turn to speak. During lecture time, in conversations. Number 5, give others a chance to speak. Share a personal experience or comment on a topic. Ask a peer question about the topic. Wait for the speaker to finish before adding to the conversation. Topic maintenance. Only talk about one topic at a time. Number 7, ask questions when confused. Ask questions relate to the lessons. Ask questions while conversing with peers. Number 8, terminating conversations. See you tomorrow. See you later. I have to go now. Bye. Many of our leaders and government officials are very good with pragmatic skills, and they're able to use all of these skill sets to manipulate and deceive people. They follow all the rules, and they can convey themselves effectively with communication, and that is part of the issue we have in recognising and being able to discern the truth. Pragmatics, like semantics, has numerous subfields. Let's look at them now before concluding with an example of how the world we live in elects leaders and governments with effectively con artists, finessers, liars, and corrupt individuals to lead us. Individuals that utilise the power of languages, semantics and pragmatics in a highly effective manner, and efficient communication skills to take advantage of the masses in an inauthentic way. Let's look at the first pragmatic subfield, which is speech-act theory. This explores how utterances perform actions rather than just conveying information. Key concepts include locutionary act, the literal meaning of the utterance. For example, it's cold in here, a statement about temperature. A locutionary act, the intended function of the utterance. For example, it's cold in here may be a request to close the window. Researcher J.L. Austin, How to Do Things with Words, 1962. The perlocutionary act, the effect of the utterances on the listener. Example, listener closes the window after hearing it's cold in here. Researcher John Searle, who expanded on Austin's work. Number 2, conversational implicature, focuses on how meaning is implied rather than explicitly stated. Key concepts, Grice's maxims. Paul Grice proposed 4 maxims that guide cooperative conversation. Number 1, quality, be truthful. 2, quantity, provide the right amount of information. 3, relation, be relevant. 4, manner, be clear and orderly. An example, A, are you coming to the party? B, I have a lot of work to do, implying they won't attend. Researcher H.P. Grice, Logic and Conversation, 1975. Number 3, deixis, examines words and phrases that rely on context to convey meaning. Key types, person deixis, refers to participants in the conversation. Example, I, you, we. Timedexis refers to points in time. Example, now, yesterday, soon. Placedexis refers to locations. Example, here, there, everywhere. Discoursedexis refers to parts of the conversation. For example, as mentioned earlier. Researcher Stephen Levinson, Pragmatics, 1983. Number 4. Politeness theory studies how language reflects social norms and relationships. Key concepts. Face theory. People have a face they want to maintain in interactions. Positive face, the desire to be liked and appreciated. Negative face, the desire to have autonomy and freedom. Examples include positive politeness. You're so good at this, could you help me? Negative politeness. I'm sorry to bother you, but could you help? Researchers Penelope Brown and Stephen Levinson. Politeness, Some Universals in Language Usage, 1987. Number 5. Pragmatic presupposition. Involves assumptions that are taken for granted in communication. Key concepts. Presupposition. Information assumed to be true or shared by speakers. For example, John's sister is a doctor. Presupposes that John has a sister. Researcher Robert Stalnaker. Pragmatic Presuppositions, 1974. Number 6. Contextual pragmatics. Analyzes how different types of context shape meaning. Key types. Physical context. The environment where communication occurs. Example, it's over there. Makes sense only if the location is clear. Social context. The relationship between participants. Example, using formal or versus informal language based on hierarchy. For example, a young person having a conversation with an older person. Cultural context. Shared cultural knowledge influencing interpretation. Example, the meaning of thank you in different cultures. Number 7. Relevance theory focuses on how listeners infer meaning based on relevance. Key concepts. Listener assumes speakers convey the most relevant information with the least effort. For example, A. Where's the milk? B. In the fridge. Relevant and concise. Researchers Dan Sperber and Deirdre Wilson. Relevance, Communication and Cognition, 1986. Number 8. Pragmatics in Discourse Analysis studies how pragmatic principles operate in extended text and conversations. For key example, turn-taking, managing who speaks when. Example, pausing to let others speak in group discussions. Topic management, how topics are introduced, maintained, or changed. Example, politicians steering conversations towards their agenda, which I will advance further on at the end of this subject. Researcher Deborah Tannen, Conversational Style, Analyzing Talk Among Friends. Intercultural pragmatics, number 9, explores pragmatic variation across cultures and languages. Key areas: cross-cultural communication, differences in politeness strategies. Example, directness in Western cultures versus indirectness in Asian cultures. Interlanguage pragmatics, how non-native speakers use and interpret pragmatic norms. Example, a non-native English speaker misunderstanding indirect requests. Researcher Istvan Kekskes, Intercultural pragmatics. Number 10, computational pragmatics, applies pragmatics in artificial intelligence and natural language processing. Applications, chatbots and virtual assistants. Understanding user intent and generating appropriate responses. Example, Siri interpreting what's the weather like as a request for local forecasts. Sentiment analysis, detecting tone and emotion in texts. Let's summarize what we've learnt through this section and apply what has been covered in the following slides. Summary. Pragmatics examines how meaning is influenced by context, intentions, and social interactions. Its subfields include speech-act theory, how utterances perform actions. 2. Conversational implicature, implied meanings in conversations. Deixis, context-dependent references. Politeness theory, social norms in language use. Presupposition, assumptions in communication. Contextual pragmatics, role of physical, social, and cultural contexts. Relevance theory, inferring meaning based on relevance. Discourse pragmatics, pragmatics in extended conversations. Intercultural pragmatics, pragmatic variation across cultures. And finally, computational pragmatics, AI applications of pragmatic principles. By exploring these aspects, pragmatics bridges the gap between literal language and real-world communication. And by understanding pragmatics better, we can have a better understanding of what is happening in our real world. In this section of the presentation, I'm going to draw on some concepts of what has previously been discussed in the Semantics and Pragmatics section to exemplify behaviour and character analysis of the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Throughout my 44 years of life, I observed that many world leaders we elect are corrupt and possess severe character flaws, yet they are charismatic, pragmatic and skilled at persuasion, with charm and finesse. They manipulate individuals unaware of their true intentions. In this piece, I analyse the behaviour and actions of the UK's current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, as an example of such leadership. When you reject or expose the control of narcissistic, sociopathic or psychopathic individuals, they will do everything to destroy loyal character rather than admit accountability. They prey on emotional weaknesses using money, coercive language, and manipulation to exert control. People have fundamental needs: security, shelter, sustenance, Maslow's hierarchy reference. These leaders exploit those needs by presenting themselves as caring and supportive, but their intent is insidious. Politicians, for instance, make promises during elections, like Labour's pledge to protect heating allowances for pensioners, only to break them once in power. This is incongruence. Their words do not match their actions. Their deception is subtle yet effective, maintaining an illusion of choice between political parties, though both ultimately act against the public's interest. On one occasion, Keir Starmer stated, "If you don't like how I run the country, then you're free to leave, to get out and leave." An ultimatum. Notice how that's one of the signs of emotionally manipulative behaviour in the image pictured aside. It was a form of a threat. The implied implicature that we learnt of earlier in the presentation is to conform. It's not openly stated, hence why it's an implied threat stroke ultimatum. For many, it's not as simple as a feat to just up and leave everything and everyone. It requires a great amount of planning and finance to move. By making this statement, he's denying individuals one, if not more, of those needs for security and stability, referenced by Maslow's hierarchy of needs, hence why it was met with defence and taken as a form of oppression. This piece aims to highlight manipulative behaviours, exposing how such individuals mask their true nature. Their goal is to control, exploit and impose their will, enforcing draconian policies, fostering compliance and suppressing dissent. They manipulate both mentally and physically, treating everyone as expendable. Even those who believe they are in favour will be betrayed when convenient. Their primary method is psychological manipulation, which is difficult to detect since it leaves no visible scars. Instead, they reframe reality to cast dissenters as the problem. If you challenge their control, they will label you negatively, making it difficult for victims of their abuse to be heard or taken seriously. These individuals are masters of deception. They wear different masks depending on their audience. This was also highlighted under Pragmatics. Making empty promises and behaving differently in private versus public. They systematically lower people's defences using charm, calculated kindness and deception. Lying, manipulation and gaslighting are their main tools. They alter their stories, adding or omitting details to create confusion. When inconsistencies are pointed out, they deny, deflect or accuse others of misunderstanding, taking things from out of context. This gaslighting erodes the victim's confidence, causing mental and physical stress by triggering the brain's fight or flight mode. Once flight or fight mode is activated, the response may be victims may become frustrated, emotional, or even destructive, behaviour that is then used against them to justify further marginalisation. An example of this played out in June and July of 2024, after the Southport killings, where 3 young girls were murdered. The focus here is not the nationality of the perpetrator or him being a migrant, but the fraudulent response of Keir Starmer. Instead of addressing people's concerns, he dismissed them as liars. The media, acting as his shield, censored information, vilified the victims and labelled those raising concerns as far-right. This is a deliberate tactic by attaching negative connotations to a group. Leaders dehumanise them, making it easier to suppress dissent. Citizens defending their livelihoods, healthcare and families against government overreach are silenced through online censorship, which many dismiss as conspiracy, yet figures like Mark Zuckerberg, pictured, have openly admitted to enforcing censorship on behalf of governments. This proves the existence of systemic control over public discourse. Through the media framing and selective reporting, figures like Starmer project themselves as benevolent, eloquent and refined, reinforcing a false image of competence and goodwill. They use soundbite phrases like "lessons have been learned" to imply accountability, yet their repeated failures prove otherwise. Their words are designed to pacify, not to take action. When pressed for real answers, they evade. Starmer, for example, fled a press conference recently when challenged by a journalist. These individuals rely on scripted responses. Under pressure, their inability to think critically is exposed. Labelling groups as far-right or far-left is another method of manipulation. It biases public perception, turning society against those who challenge the government's narrative. This psychological projection distracts from the real perpetrators of wrongdoing, and only one side of the story is told. The media complicitly admits key facts, further distorting reality. This tactic creates sympathy for the manipulator, as people instinctively trust authority figures. Governments capitalise on this trust, reinforcing their grip on power through emotional manipulation and engineered division. This, in turn, marginalises dissenters further, making their frustration appear irrational when, in reality, they are resisting oppression. Starmer exemplifies this authoritarian tendency. His push for greater surveillance powers, including access to mobile data, is not the action of a democratic leader, but of someone intent on silencing opposition. This is just one of many ways in which the government expands its control while masquerading as a force for good. These manipulative tactics are increasing in frequency, making it imperative that people recognise them. This is not about political affiliation or ideology. Such figures target everyone, regardless of background or who they vote for. True awareness of their methods is essential to resisting their influence and preserving freedom. Evil does not discriminate. It seeks only to control and deceive. Recognising it is the first step to resisting it. Let's now conclude and end the presentation. I'm going to introduce you to the concept of the closed-loop control system and the role they play within our education systems around the world. I will explain how they are used and can be used to indoctrinate and brainwash our children. Pictured is a block diagram of a closed-loop system. They are primarily used in engineering and control systems for machines, embedded systems, electromechanical devices, computer programs, and programming. The principles of a closed-loop system can be applied through a paperwork and governance structure also. First, I'll explain a physical example before providing a governance form that the schools use to the detriment of our society. An example of a closed-loop system that many would recognise is an ATM, when we withdraw cash from our banks. Number 1. Initially, the input is your desire for cash, the card, and the PIN number. We read and follow the screen instructions and give the relevant information. Insert card and enter PIN. Number 3. The ATM will then present us with what's known as a hierarchical menu system of choices, e.g. bank balance, withdraw cash, and change PIN are common choices. The control is performed by the individual and computer within the device. It controls the screen and the keypad, performed by the internal hardware and microprocessor. The menu system of flow processes the software that initiates and processes the interaction sequentially. Number 4. If we select withdraw cash, we'll be presented with a submenu to specify the amount. Number 5. Upon selecting the amount, the cash will be withdrawn upon completion of the menus and be dispensed. Depending on the ATM, will then be offered another or other services the device is capable of before returning the card. This is the feedback element. Number 6. If we select no, the card will be returned and the output is your cash or information presented on screen or printed out. If you request another service, the ATM will loop around to present the home menu of choices. Number 7. Only the set process and control are performed. The system is closed to perform any other interactions. It can only process and control set instructions given by the system and the user. So how might a closed-loop system apply to a school, you may ask? I won't go into too much detail because I've covered a significant amount of the schooling, teaching process, and conditional behavioural implementation of a curriculum in previous episodes. I relate it to a closed-loop system in a step process, and you'll hopefully reach an accord with my thought process. A thought process I believe they implement to the detriment of our children is how they program them with their gender-driven nonsense that teaches kids to only be obedient and compliant with their roles and rules in life. They don't teach individuals to be unique or free thinkers that are capable to critically analyse life, process their emotions, and act independently in thought and behaviour. They want children to only be able to follow orders, just educated enough to perform simple job roles and tasks and ask no questions, leading individuals into a life of servitude and financial slavery, to live in an open prison where they do only what the government wants and allow, which is a crime against humanity. So often as a child, I was encouraged by their sound bites, as previously mentioned, to think outside the box. If you think outside the box in modern times, however, you'll be marginalised as a crazy conspiracy theorist. You'll be accused of misbehaving, not adopting a hive mind, difficult, awkward, the list goes on. It's all double standards and hypocrisy. They are encouraging everyone to think the same, not to have independent thoughts, anything but to think outside the box, but to conform and comply or there will be trouble. Modern teachers are not impartial. They openly discuss personal beliefs, thoughts, feelings and beliefs which immorally and ethically imprint our children. They are corrupting the children's minds. The schools are not teaching our children how to think, they are teaching our children what to think. They are essentially indoctrination camps. This is further highlighted by example, the recent calls for our schools to be audited to allow transparency of what is being taught. The UK Labour government demonstrated their contempt for our children and their evil manipulative actions by rejecting parents' calls for insight to allow public discourse to freely and openly publish what is now being taught to our children. The headline pictured, source The Telegraph, 12th of February 2025. This is an abhorrent act. These governments do not own our children, and serious urgent steps need to be taken to undo what is being done and carried out by these fascist criminals, to preserve our freedoms and the freedoms of our children to a free and fair unimpaired education, to return our children's minds to being taught how to think, not what to think. This must be understood before it's too late. Let's look at the closed-loop system pictured. We have a student who in this case is considered the input, who leaves home each day. They go to school, a building with no access and thus arranged by other individuals than school teachers, classroom workers, assistant staff and maybe security. These properties are controlled by the government and local authority. The government decide exactly what is taught and by whom and when. This is the process that is followed. There is no input from external sources. Neither you nor I can have influence on what is being taught and when. It is closed off from the public. Therefore, it is a closed-loop system by definition. Feedback, conditioning to conform and behave a certain way is decided by those who follow the process, rules and regulations of the school. Failure to comply is subject, then, to disciplinary processes. There's some public oversight by a board of governors, but they still have only a minor input to what is carried out. This is incorporated into the feedback loop. Before the output of the students' exams and schoolwork is what's produced as an output. By the end of school, they'll have repeated the process over 13-14 times as each student progresses through each year. By the end of schooling, they have produced a compliant and obedient individual, supposedly for adult work, yet many corporations report that they struggle to hire competent, experienced and educated people for their positions. They sometimes argue they need to recruit from abroad. So what is going on for such a situation to occur? The government's failing our children. They are being conditioned only to think a particular way. If I were to decide each year you'll follow the following processes, then you'll only receive that education. Each day, if I sit you down and teach you A is B and B is A, by the end of schooling, you'll believe that and you'll reproduce, mimic that experience as the output. This is a very simple example, but this is the power and control we're affording these people. They can program our children with whatever thoughts and feelings they want to project onto our children. We now have evidence this is happening, as shown in the image and discussed in the previous episode of indoctrination and brainwashing within the schooling system. As recently as this month, February 2025, the Labour government has been refusing and resisting to allow parents the right to know exactly what is being taught. They are not allowing transparency in the process. They are not providing the information on the curricula. They are directly affecting our children's confidence. They are only teaching them what the government wants them to know, irrespective of the parents' desires, wants or needs for their children. Some children now return home, alienated by school, students telling their parents that they are wrong because the teacher, Mr. Tom, said so at school. They are now ignoring the lead of their parents. They are not listening to their parents' advice. They are misbehaving and they are becoming rude. This is an absolute abuse of power. It's integral that we act to stop these criminals from abusing our children, especially concerning sexual education, political beliefs, etc. Schools are and were intended to teach children necessary life skills, not to influence political bias or religious bias, but they have been doing this now for a very long time. And when they incorporated policies that cease to allow parents to discipline their children, destroy competitive nature, now we have a generation of individuals unable to cope with the pressures of life, unskilled in physical labour, everything becoming service-based, and people only aiming for high-profile jobs that are not equipped for some children to be able to do, that only a select few can achieve. Systemic abuse and trauma inflicted by bullying within the system to conform to behave as they are told. They are not allowing children to think for themselves, leaving them incapable of thinking for themselves post-education, which leads these individuals to low morale, low levels of confidence to achieve good results outside of school, unable to take criticism or understand what critique is. They are being taught to obey authority without any hesitation or questioning, or not to hold authority to account, such as I am in this instance. Disadvantages of a closed-loop governance system. While closed-loop systems improve efficiency, they can be detrimental in governance and education by limiting freedom, stifling creativity, and enforcing rigid conformity. Key disadvantages include 1. Lack of external influence. Since input is restricted to government-sanctioned information, there is no room for parental involvement or external perspectives. 2. Suppression of critical thinking. Students are taught what to think, not how to think, creating a society of individuals who comply without questioning authority. 3. Elimination of individualism. Unique perspectives are sidelined in favour of uniformity, reducing the ability to challenge flawed or oppressive systems. 4. Controlled feedback loops. Evaluations and discipline are designed to reinforce a system's existing framework, punishing deviation from the prescribed norms. How tyrannical governments exploit closed-loop education. Tyrannical governments manipulate education to create a submissive population that aligns with their ideologies. They achieve this through restricting curricula. Only state-approved material is taught, ensuring future generations accept government narratives without question. Suppressing dissent. Educators who challenge the system are removed and students are discouraged from independent research. Mandatory ideological training. Schools integrate political, social and economic beliefs that align with the government's agenda, indoctrinating youth from an early age. Behavioural control. Psychological conditioning methods ensure students internalise obedience, reducing the likelihood of rebellion or resistance. Lack of transparency. Parents and external bodies have little access to what is taught, preventing oversight and ensuring the system remains unchecked. How students are exploited. Within such a system, students become cogs in the machine, rather than independent thinkers, trained to follow orders rather than question them, restricted in career choices, as they are only educated to fulfill specific societal roles dictated by the government. Alienated from their families, as school teachings override parental influence, creating conflicts between home values and state ideology. Dependent on authority, unable to function autonomously, fostering a culture of compliance and subservience. Summary and conclusion. Closed-loop education systems, while structured, can become tools of control when misused by tyrannical governance. By limiting information, restricting external influence, and conditioning students for obedience, such systems manufacture a population unable to challenge authority. For true intellectual freedom, education must remain open to diverse perspectives, critical thinking, and parental involvement. Only then can students break free from systemic indoctrination and become independent, free-thinking individuals. Thank you for joining me on the latest episode of the Inversiverse. Today, we explored the concepts of semantics and pragmatics, delving into key theories, notable researchers, and real-world examples that illustrate these linguistic frameworks. We also conducted a behavioural analysis of Keir Starmer, examining specific aspects of his speech and actions that raise concerns and points of interest regarding his intentions and character. I highlighted examples of his rhetoric and behaviour, offering insights into how certain individuals craft their public personas to influence and manipulate others. Additionally, I discussed how people wear metaphorical masks, shaping their communication styles, body language, and public image to achieve specific goals. We explored the psychological and linguistic strategies behind these behaviours, linking them to established models of persuasion and influence. I also introduced the concept of closed-loop systems and how such systems are embedded within our educational frameworks, often without our awareness. Through visual aids and block diagrams and governance frameworks, I illustrated how these systems function, their advantages and disadvantages, and the potential for students and individuals to be exploited both during and after their education if they lack aware of these mechanisms. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to our next discussion on the Inversiverse.